It was a cold morning in Winterfell when the raven came. King Robert Baratheon was coming north, bringing half his court with him. Queen Cersei, her brothers, her children, all of them were coming. Lord Eddard Stark stood in the godswood, snow in his hair, his face unreadable. He had served as Warden of the North for many years, and he had always done so with honor. But now the word honor didn't sit well with him anymore. Too many good men had died with honor. He had just buried his brother-in-law, Jon Arryn, a man who tried to protect the realm with truth, and ended up dead for it. And the realm, it was rotting from the inside. Robert had become a drunk. Cersei ruled behind his back. The Lannisters were growing stronger each day. Ned Stark knew the truth about the royal children. He had seen the blonde hair. He had read the old book Jon Arryn left behind. And he had made a decision. Not the one that the old Ned would have made. This time he wouldn't fight to protect the realm. He would control it. When Robert arrived, he was tired and drunk, but he smiled the same as before. He hugged Ned and called him brother. They hunted, they drank, they laughed like old times. But inside, Ned was cold, watching, planning. That night, as they sat alone near the fire, Robert said the words that changed everything again. "I want you to be hand of the king." Ned nodded slowly. He pretended to resist, but his heart had already accepted. Not because he trusted Robert, not anymore, but because he needed to be in King's Landing to do what had to be done. He said yes. And just like that, the game had begun. On the road to King's Landing, Ned wrote letters in secret. He sent one to Petyr Baelish, another to Varys, even one to Tywin Lannister. He was building something, a web of lies, half-truths, and alliances. The old Ned Stark would have hated this. But the North needed power, not pride. His family needed safety, not stories. When they finally arrived at the Red Keep, Queen Cersei met them with her fake smile. Prince Joffrey stood beside her, trying to look like a man. Ned looked at the boy and saw more than arrogance. He saw someone desperate to prove himself, someone easy to bend, if handled right. And that was the moment Ned Stark chose his pawn. Instead of warning Robert about the children's parentage, Ned did the opposite. He praised Joffrey in public, took him under his wing, taught him about honor, loyalty, and how a king should rule. But in private he whispered other things, dangerous things. Power is not given, Joffrey. It is taken. You must learn to listen even when others speak lies. Your mother loves you, but love can be weakness in a king. And Joffrey listened. He believed Ned Stark was the only one who saw greatness in him. He was a boy, yes, but one with a dangerous future. Meanwhile, Robert continued to drink himself into the grave. Cersei noticed Ned's closeness with Joffrey but said nothing at first. She underestimated him, just like everyone did. Ned's plan was simple. Let Robert fall. Let the Lannisters feel safe. And when the time was right, make Joffrey king, not as a lion, but as a wolf in golden clothes. A king who owed his crown to Ned Stark. A boy who would do anything for the man who made him feel powerful. Winter was coming. But so was something colder. A Northman's betrayal wrapped in a king's crown. King's Landing was a nest of snakes. And Ned Stark had finally decided to stop stepping carefully and start charming the serpents. For the first time in his life, he understood what men like Littlefinger and Varys always whispered about. Real power didn't sit on the throne. It stood behind it. And so, Eddard Stark of Winterfell, the Warden of the North, who once believed in black and white, began to live in grey. His first step, win over Joffrey completely. He didn't speak to the boy like a child. He spoke to him like a king. When Joffrey complained about the knights not listening, Ned nodded thoughtfully and replied, "They respect fear more than words. A king must command both." When Joffrey insulted Sansa, Ned corrected him gently, not with anger but reason. A queen is not just a crown. She is your ally. If you belittle her in public, your enemies will think your house is divided. It worked. Joffrey began to look at Ned not as a servant of the crown, but as the father he never had. Behind closed doors, the hand of the king was making quieter. more dangerous moves. He called in Peter Baelish one rainy night. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and thunder growled over Blackwater Bay. "Lord Stark," Littlefinger said with a smirk, "you rarely summon me for whispers." "Should I be flattered?" Ned didn't smile. "You've always wanted a piece of the pie, Peter. I'm offering you the whole kitchen." Littlefinger's eyes narrowed. "Go on." Ned leaned forward. "Robert's days are numbered. The man is a drunken mess. When he dies, and he will soon, I want Joffrey on the throne." "A bold choice," Littlefinger said, licking his lips. "Considering the boy isn't even Robert's true son." Ned looked him dead in the eye. "Exactly. Which is why I'll need you to forge a few things. A royal decree naming Joffrey the heir, a letter sealed with Robert's hand. Something convincing. You're asking me to fake a king's words." "I'm asking you to help shape the future," Ned said quietly. "If Joffrey rules, you rise with him. I'll make sure you're named Master of Coin, for life." Littlefinger paused, calculating, then nodded slowly. "Done." And with that, the first real stone of the new kingdom was set. Meanwhile, Queen Cersei was growing suspicious. She noticed Joffrey spending more time with Ned, asking for his opinion, even quoting him in court. She confronted her son one evening in the royal gardens. "You listen to him too much," she said. "He's not your father." "No," Joffrey snapped. "He's better." Her eyes widened. "He's a Stark. His loyalty lies in the north. He speaks to me like a king," Joffrey hissed, stepping closer. "Not like some fragile boy who needs protecting." "Maybe that's what you can't stand." Cersei slapped him across the face. There was silence. Then Joffrey whispered, "You shouldn't have done that." And for the first time, Cersei saw it. Not just her son's cruelty, but his ambition. It wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to Ned Stark. Robert Baratheon's death came on a hunting trip, just as in the true tale, but this time the wine he drank wasn't just strong. It was poisoned, Varys knew. He had smelled the cup, but he said nothing. The Lannister cousin who poured it was paid in gold and vanished by morning. When the king's broken body was brought back to the castle, the city was shocked, but not surprised. Robert had been failing for years. Ned Stark did not cry. He did not kneel. He stood beside the Iron Throne as Joffrey was crowned, and when the boy turned to him and said, "Lord Stark, what should I say to the people?" Ned whispered just loud enough for the court to hear, "Tell them that peace has returned. The small council approved the coronation." The fake decree forged by Littlefinger was discovered in Robert's chambers. It named Joffrey as heir, no mention of Stannis. No challenge from Renly, no questions asked, and anyone who did question, they disappeared. Cersei was locked out of Joffrey's war room. Tywin was summoned but held at a distance. Jaime, already stationed with the Kingsguard, was told by Joffrey himself, "You protect me." That's all. Decisions are mine, and Lord Stark's. Sansa was declared the future queen. Her hand, now trembling with confusion and fear, was kissed by a boy who had once mocked her. Arya saw what was happening and went to her father, furious. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "This isn't you." But Ned only looked at her with tired eyes. "Sometimes, to keep a family safe, you must become what you hate." She didn't understand. Not yet. The city rejoiced at first. Gold flowed through the streets. Thieves were hanged. Laws were enforced. Bread was cheaper. Order had returned. Joffrey, under Ned's careful control, became a new kind of king, ruthless in public, obedient in private. But peace bought with lies never lasts, and deep in the shadows, across the narrow sea and in the cold halls of Dragonstone, other players began to move. Stannis, Varys, Daenerys, even Tyrion, who no longer trusted the boy king's sudden wisdom. Ned Stark had betrayed his honor. Now he would find out if power was worth the price of his soul. Varys moved through the Red Keep like a ghost. No sound, no trail, only whispers in his wake. He had watched kings come and go, but nothing disturbed him quite like the new Joffrey. The boy still wore a crown of gold, but now he wore a mask of control, one carefully shaped by Ned Stark. That was what frightened Varys most. Not Joffrey, but the wolf behind the throne. Varys wasn't the only one unsettled. In the corners of taverns, the streets of Flea Bottom, and behind the closed doors of brothels, rumors spread. "The boy king speaks like a Northman," they whispered. "It's Stark blood ruling the realm now, and if that were true, then the game wasn't over. It had only just begun." Ned sat in the Tower of the Hand, the seat once held by Jon Arryn. He looked out at the city below, the stars dull in the polluted sky. Power should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Not yet. Sansa had begun smiling again. Joffrey treated her like a queen, in public at least. Ned had warned him, "Touch her wrongly, and I'll cut off the hand you use." Joffrey had simply nodded. The boy was learning. Too fast, but Arya was a storm. She no longer trained with Syrio Forel. She trained in silence, in shadows. She no longer trusted her father, and Ned felt that like a knife between his ribs. That night, he found her in the crypts. "Your mother would never forgive me for what I'm becoming," Ned whispered. Arya didn't turn. "Then maybe you shouldn't become it." Meanwhile, across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen watched the smoke rise from the Dothraki fires. She was not a frightened girl anymore. She was Khaleesi, wife of Khal Drogo, blood of the dragon, and she had heard the news. Robert Baratheon was dead. That meant the man who ordered her death was gone. But it also meant the Iron Throne was open, and dragons do not sit quietly when thrones are left empty. One of her handmaidens brought word that same night, whispered, from a drunken sailor who docked at Slaver's Bay. "The boy Joffrey wears the crown, but the wolf is the true king, a Stark ruling Westeros." Daenerys clenched her fists. "The usurper's pet wants to wear my crown." She stood tall, flames in her eyes, then let Westeros burn. Back in King's Landing, the lion finally roared. Tywin Lannister arrived at the capital with 1,000 men behind him, all armored in red and gold. He rode through the city gates without a smile, without a word. He had seen enough letters, heard enough whispers, and when he stood before Joffrey, bowing just enough to avoid insult, he addressed the boy directly. "Your Grace," he said, voice calm, "why is it that I hear Lord Stark's name more often than yours?" Joffrey looked to Ned, then back at his grandfather. "Because Lord Stark is loyal and wise." Tywin's jaw tightened. "Loyalty," he said coldly, "ends where power begins. And a king who leans on another man's wisdom is not a king at all." The silence that followed was heavy. But Joffrey, with just the slightest smirk, replied, "That may be true, but sometimes lions forget that wolves hunt in packs." That night, Tywin sent a raven to Casterly Rock. One word only: prepare. Inside the Red Keep, things began to crumble. Sansa was starting to see through Joffrey's charm. He smiled and kissed her hand in court, but when no one was watching, his eyes were colder than Winterfell ice. He no longer asked for her opinion. He gave orders and expected her to obey, she told Ned. He nodded. "Do not fear him," he said. "He fears losing control more than anything. That's his weakness. But what if he stops listening to you?" she whispered. Ned didn't answer, because that question kept him awake every night. One evening, a raven arrived. It bore a black seal, not from the north, not from the Vale, but from Dragonstone. Ned opened the letter alone. It was from Stannis Baratheon. It read, "I know the truth of the boy on the throne. You know it too. You bend the knee to false blood. I will not. Prepare your wolf. The storm is coming." Ned burned the letter. He had killed one king with silence. He would not let another ruin what he had built. But betrayal never stays buried in the shadows of the Red Keep. Arya Stark followed a voice she didn't trust. It was Baelish. He met with 2 cloaked men near the dungeons. Arya, hiding behind stone, listened closely. "She suspects," Baelish whispered. "The Queen?" One man asked. "No," said Baelish. "The girl, Sansa, she sees the cracks in the boy king. She sees the hand too clearly. And what do you plan to do?" Baelish paused. "I plan," he said slowly, "to let the lion and the wolf destroy each other. Then I'll feed off the bones." Arya's hand went to her hidden blade. She now knew 2 things. Baelish was planning something dangerous, and her father was no longer the man she thought he was. As the bells of the Red Keep rang in the night, Echoing across the city, thunder cracked over Blackwater Bay. In the North Tower, Ned Stark stood at the window. A storm was rolling in. From the sea, from the shadows, from fire and stone, and though he wore the title of Hand, the truth was clear. He was no longer the protector of the realm. He was the architect of its next war. The Red Keep had never felt colder. Even in summer, Ned Stark sat in his chambers, his hands shaking slightly as he reread a note he'd written a dozen times and never sent. It was a message to Robb, his eldest son in Winterfell. A warning, or maybe a confession. Your father has done what he once swore never to do. I've traded honor for power, and now even power is slipping away. Watch the South with sharp eyes, son, and trust no one, not even me. He folded the letter, sealed it with wax, but didn't send it. What was the point? By the time a raven reached Winterfell, the blood would already be flowing. Joffrey was no longer a boy. He had the body of one, yes, but his eyes were different, hard, cold. He had tasted power, and now he hungered for control. Ned watched from the council chamber as Joffrey dismissed old lords like children. He overruled decisions, mocked seasoned men, and even corrected Tywin publicly. That had never happened before. At first, Ned had thought he could shape the boy. Now he wasn't so sure he hadn't simply unleashed him. You've created a monster, Varys whispered one evening as they walked alone through the black cells. No, Ned replied, jaw clenched. I gave him a sword. He chose to swing it like a butcher. Varys tilted his head. But who handed him the blade, my lord? In the background, pieces were shifting without Ned's hand. Cersei was no longer hiding in silence. She had been waiting, watching. And now she struck back, not with swords, but with something far deadlier. Whispers. She went to Sansa late one evening. No guards, no dresses, just a mother and a girl. Do you feel safe? Cersei asked softly. Sansa hesitated. Of course. Then why do you cry at night? Sansa blinked. I don't... Yes, you do, the Queen said. And I hear it. Because I once cried too. She took Sansa's hand gently. Joffrey is not your fault, nor is your father's ambition. But the day will come when the North must choose its honor or its survival. And just like that, Sansa's heart was split in two. The next blow came quickly, quieter but cruel. Arya was missing. She had vanished without warning, and no one in the Red Keep could find her. Not her guards, not her handmaidens, not even Varys. Her chambers were untouched. Her sword needle gone, Ned panicked. Not outwardly, but inside. He knew his daughter. Arya didn't run. She hunted. If she was gone, it meant she had found something or someone worth killing, and she wasn't ready. She's a child, Ned snapped at the guards. No, whispered Varys. She's a Stark. That same night, blood was spilled, not on the battlefield, not with honor, but in a dark corridor. Near the godswood of the Red Keep, where whispers screamed louder than blades, Sir Roderick Cassel, old, loyal, strong as the North stone, was found with his throat cut, slumped beneath a weirwood tree. He had been investigating Littlefinger. He had followed the wrong trail, and it led him straight into a trap. When Ned saw his old friend's body, he knelt. He didn't cry, but he stayed there, longer than a lord should, staring at the red leaves swaying in the breeze. It wasn't war yet, but it had begun. Petter Baelish attended court the next day with a smile. He offered his condolences. Such a tragedy that old knights wander places they shouldn't. Ned met his gaze. It won't be your hand next time, Petter. Littlefinger grinned. Oh, Lord Stark, you still believe in next times? Meanwhile, across the sea, Daenerys had reached Korth. She was no longer just a Khaleesi. She had dragons. Small, fragile, but real. Living fire curled in her hands. She met with a warlock that night, his skin pale and lips blue. He showed her a vision in the House of the Undying, a boy on a throne of swords. A wolf whispering into his ear. Fire consuming them both. What does it mean? She asked. It means you are the storm, the warlock said, but you are not the first wind to blow through Westeros. And the wolf? she asked. He stole the fire. She stood, clutching her dragon. Then I'll steal it back. In the north, Robb Stark received no letter. Only silence. And silence is a message too, he called the bannerman. The south grows quiet, he said. Too quiet, Maester Lewin raised an eyebrow. What do you intend to do, my lord? Robb looked toward the horizon. Toward King's Landing. I intend to remind them that wolves don't purr. We bite, and deep beneath the Red Keep in the darkness where secrets rot, Arya Stark sharpened her blade. She had seen something, she had heard something, and now she had a list. One name stood out more than all the rest. Baelish. The streets of King's Landing were uneasy. The gold cloaks stood at every corner, but their presence didn't bring safety. It brought fear. The common folk whispered of strange things. Missing servants, closed inns, rats leaving the Red Keep. Some said the Queen was preparing something. Others believed Lord Stark had already taken the throne in all but name. Either way, tension cracked through the city like dry wood, begging for fire, and that fire was coming. It started with a head. One quiet morning, just as the sun bled over the walls of the capital, a cart rolled into the city square. A sack was thrown onto the cobblestones, and when the guard opened it, out rolled the head of Lord Renly Baratheon. Screams filled the air. The king's uncle, the younger brother of Robert Baratheon, a man known for charm, for beauty, for ambition, and now for death. The city shook, and the throne room went silent. Joffrey stared down at the blood-stained message delivered with the head. One pretender down, 2 more to go. The rightful king will take his throne. Stannis Baratheon, Cersei screamed at the small council. He kills my brother and sends us a letter. A letter, and what do you all do? Sit and squabble like hens. Ned said nothing. Tywin Lannister stood beside the map table, unmoved. Stannis has moved his fleet. Dragonstone is no longer a quiet corner. He's coming. Baelish, ever calm, smiled. And yet he kills Renly instead of Ned. Curious, don't you think? Joffrey slammed his fist on the table. We'll send 1,000 ships. We'll burn Dragonstone to ashes. No, Ned said sharply. Everyone turned. You want to burn an island before you even see what he's planning. Ned stepped forward. You burn your enemies after they show their teeth, not when they howl. Joffrey looked at him with that boyish fury. But he nodded again, and in that moment Cersei knew she had lost her son, not to death, but to Ned Stark's mind. But the Queen wasn't done playing. That night, in the Tower of the Hand, Ned was awoken by a knock. It was Sansa, pale, shaking. He rushed to her. What happened? They tried to take me. His heart stopped. What? I was walking near the kitchens. 2 men, gold cloaks. They said you sent them. But they... Her voice cracked. They didn't act like your men. They grabbed me. I ran. Ned's blood turned to ice. They had moved against his daughter. Someone was no longer afraid to strike. He stormed into the barracks of the City Watch that night, met with Janos Slynt, the commander of the Gold Cloaks. Who gave the order to seize Lady Sansa? Ned demanded. Slynt blinked. What? I gave no such order. You're lying. I swear it. I'd never move on a Stark girl without your command. My lord. Ned's hand went to his sword. And Slynt flinched, but then someone stepped from the shadows. Varys, Lord Stark, he said calmly. It wasn't Slynt. Then who? The Queen, Varys whispered. She tested the waters. She wanted to see how far you would go to protect what's yours. And next time? Ned asked. There won't be a test. Only blood. Cersei sat in her chambers that evening, glass of wine in her hand, watching the flames in the fireplace. Jaime stood behind her, silent. I want the girl removed, Cersei said softly. Not killed, not yet. Just gone. A hostage somewhere. Somewhere the wolf can't reach, Jaime frowned. She's just a girl. She's a Stark girl, Cersei snapped. That name carries teeth now. We're being pushed out of our own city, Jaime. You can feel it too. Jaime looked at the fire. Then maybe it's time we push back. In the shadows of the Red Keep, Arya waited. She had followed Baelish again. This time, not to some brothel or council meeting. This time, to a dark chamber beneath the old sept, far below the castle, and there She saw something no one else had: maps, letters, coins, and a single book. Inside were names, dates, secrets, treasons, and on the last page, written in blood-red ink, one name stood alone. Joffrey Baratheon, replace. Stark control rising. Leverage Sansa, weapon Faith of the Seven. Arya blinked. Replace Joffrey? Was Baelish planning to take the throne from her father too? She turned to leave and heard a step behind her, then darkness. The next morning, chaos erupted. A raven arrived from the Riverlands. Robb Stark had crossed the Neck with 20,000 Northmen. Ned read the letter alone. He gripped the edges of the paper so tightly his knuckles went. White Robb had moved without his command, but it was too late to stop him. He looked up as Joffrey stormed into the chamber. "Why is your son marching south?" The boy snapped. Ned didn't flinch. To remind the realm that the North still has teeth, Joffrey's eyes narrowed. "I don't need Stark armies." "I'm king." "No," Ned said coldly. "You're still a child in a crown." Joffrey's lips curled into a sneer. "Not for long." That night, bells rang out across the city. Arya Stark had vanished. No note, no trail, just blood on stone, and Littlefinger? He was gone too. The bells of King's Landing didn't ring for celebration anymore. They rang for blood. Arya was missing. Again. But this time it wasn't a childish runaway act. There was blood on the steps of the Great Sept, smeared across the white stone like war paint. No body, no note, no witness, only one thing left behind: needle. Ned held it in his hand as if it had burned him. He knew his daughter. Arya didn't leave needle. She would die with it before she let it fall into enemy hands. That meant one thing: she had been taken. Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne with one leg slung over the armrest, like a bored boy in a chair too big for him. But the boy was gone. Only the crown remained. When Ned entered, Joffrey smiled lazily. "Is this about the girl again?" "I'm growing tired of your wolves, Lord Stark." Ned didn't bow. "She's your future queen's sister. She's also a nuisance. She's your responsibility." Joffrey stood, voice rising. "Everything is my responsibility, or hadn't you noticed? You whisper into my ear, you command my court, you've turned me into your puppet king. I raised you into something the realm could follow." Joffrey's eyes burned. "Then let the realm follow you, Stark. I'm done." By nightfall, the Red Keep was locked down. Joffrey gave no orders. He disappeared into his private chambers, surrounded only by 2 new guards, both gold cloaks, loyal to no one but coin. And the Queen. She didn't mourn Arya. She poured wine. "She's gone," Cersei told Sansa with a bitter smirk. "You can thank your father's enemies. Or maybe his friends. It's hard to tell the difference these days." Sansa, pale and quiet, whispered, "She'll come back." Cersei smiled. "Not everyone does, little dove." Across the city, chaos was spreading like a sickness. Robb Stark had reached the Trident. His army wasn't waiting, it was marching. And with every step, more lords bent the knee. Blackwood, Mormont, Karstark, even the Tullys, finally. Tywin Lannister called it rebellion. Ned called it a reminder. But Varys called it something else. "Your son may be brave," the spider said quietly, "but brave men are the first to burn." Ned stood atop the battlements of the Red Keep, needle still in his hand. Below him, the city buzzed like a hornet's nest. And he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to admit before. He was losing. The boy king no longer listened. His daughter was missing. His son was on a warpath. Cersei was 2 moves ahead, and Baelish was gone with half the secrets of the realm. He had thought he could play the game, mold it, shape it, but power once touched does not forgive hesitation. That evening a black raven arrived, not from the north, from Dragonstone. "You've opened the door to fire and shadow. I will walk through it." Stannis Baratheon. And wrapped inside the letter was a second one, a copy of Robert's original will. The real one. It named Stannis as heir. The forgery Ned and Littlefinger had created was a lie. A dangerous one. And now it was being unraveled. If this letter reached the lords of the realm, everything would burn. Sansa entered Ned's chambers later that night, her eyes red. "I can't sleep," she said. "Not without knowing if Arya is alive." Ned looked at her, really looked. She had grown pale and quiet, but strong. Strong in a way Sansa had never been before. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For dragging all of you into this. For thinking I could win a war of daggers by wearing armor." Sansa walked to him, tears in her voice. "I just want us to go home." "I know," Ned whispered. "But I don't know if we can anymore." That night, the city broke. Gold cloaks flooded the lower streets. Fires were lit in the alleys of Flea Bottom. Not by rioters, but by orders. Someone was clearing ground, and at the Sept of Baelor, the bells rang, not in warning but in grief, because hanging from the gates, strung up by wire and dressed in rags, was a body, small, young, dark hair, and at the bottom, a message written in blood. "The wolf pup has been tamed." Ned arrived before sunrise. The guards tried to stop him. They failed. He pushed through the crowd, pushed through the sobs, pushed until he saw it. It wasn't Arya. It was Gendry, the blacksmith's boy. Robert's bastard. Arya's friend. They dressed him in furs, cut his face, made it look like her. It was a message, not just to him, but to the realm. The game had changed. Joffrey had sent it. Later, in the crypts beneath the Red Keep, Ned knelt before the stone statue of Lyanna Stark. "I tried," he whispered. "I tried to protect them. I became the very thing I once swore I'd destroy. And still, I'm losing them." From the shadows, Varys stepped forward. "You're not losing them, Lord Stark," he said. "You've already lost them. The only question now is, who do you burn with you on the way down?" The Iron Throne had never looked more twisted. By the time Ned returned to the Red Keep, the city was already choking on fear. Smoke drifted over the slums. The river gate had been shut for security. The whispers in the alleys no longer spoke of King Joffrey. They spoke of the Wolf King who was losing his grip. And inside the castle, Joffrey had changed. He sat taller now, spoke sharper, smiled less. He had ordered Gendry's death. That much was clear. Ned didn't need a confession. He saw it in the boy's cold eyes, the same way he once saw madness in the Mad King's gaze. But worse than that, Joffrey was starting to enjoy it. "You let your enemies breathe too long," Joffrey said, as he picked at a roasted quail during the small council meeting. "That's your problem, Lord Stark. You think wolves grow strong through patience." "I think wolves know when to bite," Ned replied coolly. "Then why haven't you?" Joffrey said. "Stannis sends you letters, your daughter vanishes, your bastard boy hangs like a pig, and still you talk about honor." Tywin watched in silence, arms crossed. Cersei sipped her wine without blinking. Even Varys, usually unreadable, looked unsettled. Then Joffrey leaned forward, voice calm, cutting. "If you won't protect your house, Stark, then maybe I should burn it myself." Later, as Ned walked the empty hall outside the council chamber, Tywin followed. "You're losing him," the old lion said. "He was never mine," Ned answered. "I tried to make him something more than his blood, and in doing so, you forgot what blood is," Tywin said. "The boy is a Lannister. He was raised by wolves, yes, but he started to bite like a lion. And what do you want, Tywin? To clean this mess before it stains us all." That night, Ned met Varys in the black tunnels beneath the Red Keep. "You've seen what he's becoming," Ned said. Varys nodded. "Yes, and so have the people. They don't fear him. They will." Ned's voice dropped. "There's only one way out of this." Varys tilted his head. "You're finally ready to kill the king you made?" Ned didn't answer, because the silence was the answer. But before the sword could be raised, another letter arrived. Not from Robb, not from Stannis, from Baelish, delivered by a girl with a coin and a broken smile. "Dear Lord Stark, you always thought the game could be played without blood. But here we are. I hold the girl. You hold the crown. Let's trade." The girl, Arya, alive, Baelish had her. Ned's fist slammed into the table hard enough to crack the wood. Sansa screamed in the next room when she heard it. He called for Ser Barristan Selmy, only him. A man of honor, a man who would understand. "I need a unit," Ned said. 10 men, quiet, loyal, we ride tonight." "Where?" "Black Cells first, then the river docks," Barristan nodded. He didn't ask questions. That's why Ned trusted him. Meanwhile, Joffrey stood on the balcony of the Red Keep. Looking out over his city, a crow landed on the rail beside him. He stared at it for a moment, then whispered, "They think I'm weak." He reached into his robe and pulled out a small dagger. Gold hilt. Ruby on the pommel, he slit the crow's throat and watched it fall. Let them come. At the docks, under moonlight, Ned found Baelish waiting. He stood beside a small boat. Arya gagged and bound inside. Barely conscious but breathing. Baelish smiled like he'd already won. "You created a king, Ned," he said. "I created a war. Let's see which of us survives the end of it." "You're playing with fire," Ned said, and resting on his sword. "Then let's both burn." But before Ned could draw, steel! An arrow hit one of his men. Ambush. Baelish vanished into the fog. Swords clashed. Blood spilled. Arya screamed. Barristan pulled her from the boat and cut her free. They fought their way back through shadow, through smoke, through betrayal. Ned didn't sleep that night. Neither did Arya. Too much had been lost, and too much was about to be taken. The next morning, Joffrey gathered the court. He stood in full armor, not ceremonial silk, but battle-worn black edged in crimson. Cersei stood beside him, pale but silent. Varys and Pycelle watched nervously. Sansa stood behind the throne, eyes fixed to the floor, and Ned entered last. Flanked by Barristan and Arya, freshly returned, bruised but alive. Joffrey looked at her, then at Ned. "You went behind my back. You sent a message in blood," Ned growled. "Now I send one in fire." He pulled the real royal decree from inside his cloak, Robert's true will, naming Stannis as heir. He dropped it at the foot of the throne. "The lie ends here." Joffrey laughed, then nodded, and gold cloaks stormed the room. Chaos erupted. Barristan drew steel. Ned grabbed Arya. Cersei screamed. Varys vanished. Steel clashed. Blood flew. Joffrey shouted over the noise, "Bring me his head." Ned raised his sword. "You want to be king?" He charged, swords met, and the wolf finally bit. The throne room was a massacre. Screams echoed off marble walls. The golden lions of House Lannister stood stained in blood. The Iron Throne loomed above it all, like a crown of blades, mocking every man who thought they could sit upon it and survive. Ned Stark stood in the center of it, sword in hand. Blood on his face, his heart racing like a war drum. Behind him, Arya clung to Ser Barristan, her eyes wide, haunted. At his feet lay two dead gold cloaks, their armor split like meat. Near the dais, Grandmaster Pycelle lay slumped against a column, wheezing his last breath. The small council had scattered or died, but Joffrey still stood, alive, smiling, a dagger in one hand, Sansa in the other. "Lay down your sword," Joffrey said, dragging Sansa by the wrist. "Or I'll paint these floors with Stark blood." Ned didn't move. "You think I won't do it?" Joffrey snapped. "I know you will," Ned said, voice like ice. "That's why I came ready to kill you first," Sansa whimpered. "Father?" Ned's eyes locked on his daughter. She was shaking, afraid, but not of him, of the boy she once thought she'd marry. And in that moment, Ned knew this wasn't about thrones anymore. It was about freeing his family from the crown. Barristan shifted slightly, readying himself for a strike, but Joffrey pressed the dagger to Sansa's throat. "Try it, old man," he hissed. "Let's see how fast honor dies." The room stilled. Then from behind the throne, a new voice echoed, "Let her go." Cersei. She emerged in her war dress, black and gold, her eyes bloodshot, her hair wild like a lioness cornered. Joffrey turned, confused. "Mother?" "I said let her go," she repeated. He hesitated. She stepped closer, slowly. "I've watched you unravel," she said coldly. "You're not my son anymore. You're something else, something that should have never worn a crown." Joffrey's hand shook. "She's a Stark. She's their weakness." "No," Cersei said. "She's a girl, and you're a boy pretending to be king." And then she did the unthinkable. She pulled a knife from her sleeve and threw it. It struck his wrist. He screamed. Sansa fell to the floor, scrambling away. Barristan lunged. Ned moved with him. Joffrey turned, furious, dagger still in hand, and charged at Ned. With the madness of every king who thought blood made him invincible. But Ned Stark had Enough! He sidestepped the lunge and drove his sword clean through Joffrey's chest. The boy king gasped, choked, fell, and when the life drained from his eyes, the room fell silent, not with horror but relief. Ned dropped the sword, looked at Cersei, looked at Sansa crying in the corner, then at Arya. Standing now, sword in her small hand, lips pressed together, eyes sharp and knowing. "Is it over?" Arya asked. Ned shook his head. "It never ends, little one." 2 days later, the city was still reeling. Word spread fast. "The king is dead. Long live the true king." But no one knew who the true king was anymore. Some backed Stannis, others whispered Robb Stark's name in the alleys like a prayer. Some still clung to the Lannister name, but without Tywin's full strength. They were faltering, and at the heart of it all stood Ned Stark, no longer Hand, no longer the North's honorable lord, but a man who had made peace with blood. He stood at the docks, cloak whipping in the salt wind. Robb had sent a raven. "Do not return. The North rides alone. You abandoned honor. Now it abandons you." Ned crushed the letter. He deserved it. He had thought power would protect his family, but it only scattered them further. He turned to Varys, standing beside him. "Will you tell the realm the truth?" Varys shrugged. "The realm doesn't want truth. It wants stories. And what story will you tell them about me?" Varys smiled faintly. "The man who raised a monster, then killed his own creation. Sansa chose to remain in the capital, not as queen, but as warden of the city. She didn't speak to her father when she made the choice. She didn't need to. Arya, though." Arya stood beside him at the dock, her blade on her hip, her hair in knots. "Where do we go now?" she asked. "Where they don't know our names," Ned said. "And if they find us?" Ned looked out at the sea. "Then they'll learn what wolves do when cornered." As the ship sailed into the fog, Ned Stark stood at the bow. No titles, no allies, no crown, only a ghost of the man he used to be, and the girl who still believed vengeance wasn't over. Behind him, the realm would rewrite his legacy. Some would call him a traitor, others a hero. But the truth would be simpler. He was the man who tried to play the game and finally lost everything but his daughters.